Welcome to the Travel Massive Podcast. Listen in as we unearth and connect with travel insiders, bringing you stories of change happening across the travel space today.
Welcome to the Travel Massive Podcast, where we share stories and trends happening in the global travel industry. For over a decade, the Travel Massive community has connected thousands of tourism professionals, travel media, influencers, and startups from around the world to meet, connect, and share ideas. Travel Massive is free to join. It only takes a few minutes to set up your profile. Hey now, I'm your host, Ric Gazarian. This is a long play Travel Massive interview with UnTours executives Richard Edwards and Jonathan Coleman. UnTours has been around since 1975, and this interview is a story of a rebirth and a reminder of what makes UnTours so unique. UnTours is the world's first certified B Corp. Not sure what that means? Well, listen into the interview to find out the details. But in short, UnTours has an incredible focus on giving back to the community, with all profits funding their foundations. UnTours has an eco-friendly approach to slow tourism, unpacking once, embedding in the community, and having a local friend. I was in Chicago while Jonathan joined from upstate New York, and Richard was keeping warm in Costa Rica. Please listen in and enjoy. I am excited to be introducing both Jonathan and Richard from UnTours. And Jonathan, why don't we start off with you? Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. My background, just quickly, I grew up in a small town in middle America with a family that didn't have a lot of money. We didn't travel. That wasn't a thing that we did from that part of the world or from our economic level. So my first time on an airplane or out of the country was when I was 21, and I was doing an internship for college with a small NGO in the Dominican Republic. I ended up going back to work for them through most of my 20s in the Dominican Republic and then in Africa and the Middle East. So that was, my first career endeavor was in the NGO world. But I found that I fit a bit better on the economic side of solving the world's problems and trying to make the world a better place. So I found my way back to the US to do an MBA that focused on that. And since that time, I've been working in the realm of entrepreneurship and investing and trying to provide both training and capital to entrepreneurs who are changing the world. So I did that in a previous position and now recently recently not so much anymore. 2 years ago, joined the UnTours Foundation to lead that work, which is our focus at the foundation. I'm sure I'll tell you more about later. And to wrap it up, before I joined the foundation, on the side, I had a little side hustle travel company I had launched with my wife, doing small group immersive experiences. So I had been dabbling in the industry, and while my full-time job was around supporting entrepreneurs, so it was a perfect fit to join the UnTours Foundation when that opportunity arose, because it's obviously merging those two worlds together. So here we are now.
Great. And Richard, if you can take a moment as well and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Ric. Richard Edwards. I came down to Costa Rica about 40 years ago and initially worked as an economist in sort of the nonprofit side to the International Development Organization of American States, but found that wasn't the right pace for me. Same kind of switch, and have been working in ecotourism for about 25 years, and have sat on the executive team of most of the larger adventure travel companies that you've heard of, and had the chance to start Planetera, the nonprofit at G Adventures, and have been involved in sustainable tourism throughout that time. So been trying to bridge those two worlds, and which is how I found my way to UnTours, which is doing that all within one organization.
Okay, very good. And Jonathan, I want to go back to you. UnTours is really a unique entity in the corporate world. UnTours is a certified B Corp. But what exactly is a certified B corporation?
Yeah, a certified B corporation or B Corp is what we say for short. It's a certification that's been around since about 2007, and a growing number of companies around the world have become certified. There's about 4,000, I think, over 4,000 now that have been certified. But a certified B Corp is really it's an it's a certification similar to certified organic or certified fair trade, but it's all encompassing of all business types, and so all industries, all sizes of businesses, and really it's measuring those businesses and certifying those businesses that are using their business as a force for good in the world across all aspects of how that business could be good or bad, across environmental practices, employment practices, profit sharing practices, and many more. Any way that a business could be good or bad, and how it interacts with the world, the certification measures, and you have to score above a certain level to obtain certification. So some of the most popular certification or certified B Corps that you might have heard of are like Patagonia is one of the really famous ones, or Ben and Jerry's. So some of these businesses that are really known for how they integrate their values with how they operate their business. Uh, a lot of those businesses that do that find their way into the B Corp community and achieve certification.
Thank you. Well, it sort of sounds like a superhero designation when you say force for good. So I do like the sound of that, and interesting to know. So it doesn't have to necessarily be something in the tourism industry.
Yeah, that's right. It's our claim to fame. We're very proud of it. Our founder was a really unique and important figure in his day, um, and how he ran UnTours the company and how he funded UnTours Foundation with UnTours the company, which I can get into more later. But the way that UnTours was running was an inspiration for the folks who were starting the B Corporation movement, and so they looked at UnTours as kind of one of the examples of what they wanted companies to be when they built the certification process out in the assessment process. And so once that was all done and the assessment was ready to go, it was just logical that UnTours was the first company to go through that process. So that was, again, back in 2007 when we were the first one. And now, again, 4,000 companies have followed in our footsteps, and we're very proud of that.
It sounds very well deserved, and I'd like to know a little bit more about the founder who, it sounds like, actually took a vow of poverty.
Yeah, that's right. He had committed to not having any money and to dedicating whatever money he did have to making the world better. So he was um, he was legit in all aspects of the word. He practiced what he preached, and he didn't just talk; he acted. So UnTours was his second career. He was first a rancher and then a professor, and then made his way into travel randomly. And so as UnTours started to make a bit of money, he had committed to not having money. So he eventually set up the foundation to take all of the profits from UnTours. So that happened in 1993. And since that time, 100% of the profits of UnTours have made their way over to the foundation. And Hal, like I said, never took a dime out of the company. He, a few other stories, but he gave away his car one day to a hitchhiker and just never drove again. Because he thought that the hitchhiker needed it more than he did, and so that was just made that decision one day, and that was that. So he was that kind of guy who really lived out his values to the fullest extent. So kind of the lasting legacy that he left, beyond there were many legacies, especially connected with the UnTours Foundation, but his last desire when he passed away was to transfer ownership of UnTours Travel to the foundation. So now, actually, and uniquely, the foundation owns the travel company. It's actually a process Patagonia went through recently that many of the listeners may have heard of. So in the corporate and foundation world, usually if the corporation has a foundation, the foundation is at service of the corporation. And that's what we see a lot of times. And in our case, it's reversed. The corporation is there and it's running a business, and it's a good business, but it is at service of the mission of the foundation, not just with its money, but in how it operates as well. And so that's really important to our makeup as a travel company and as a foundation, that we have embedded those values into the business side as well as to the foundation side. And those are all values that came from Hal, from our founder.
He really sounds like a special individual, and he really walked the walk, especially with that example of the hitchhiker. Back to the UnTours Foundation, what's the objective and what's the goal of the foundation?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the UnTours Foundation takes those profits from UnTours and from lots of other donors and partners who contribute to our work. And the core work that we do is identify the next generation of entrepreneurs who are changing the world, and try to give them the flexible capital they need to launch and grow. So in industry parlance, we would say we're impact investors, or in foundation speak, they would say mission-aligned investors, but it all means kind of the same thing. We invest money, but we do it with a lens towards impact and mission first. And we need to get that money back so that we can recycle it and put it back out into the world again. But we're looking to have an outsized impact with our dollars, not just an outsized return. And in fact, the impact takes priority over the return for us. So what we do in practice is find those entrepreneurs who are doing amazing things, understand what their financial needs are to take their next step of growth, and help to meet that with our own capital, and also by bringing others to the table.
So from my reading, I understand traditionally the UnTours Foundation would work with any company that shared your objectives or goals. But now more recently, you have a focus on the tourism industry. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's right. As I mentioned, the foundation has been around for 30 years, and was born out of a travel company, and now owns that travel company. So we know a thing or two about travel, but had never invested intentionally into the travel industry. And as COVID hit, we really realized, there was huge needs in the industry, as anyone listening to this podcast probably knows and felt personally, as we did. And we realized, we have an internal capacity that we're not using very well within the travel industry. And there's just a massive need. And also travel is an incredible lever for impact in the world. So the stat we like to say is that, or to highlight, is that travel accounts for 10% of the world's GDP, 10% of global jobs out there in the world, and almost 10% of global emissions. So the potential within the industry to have impact, for good or ill, is powerful, and we want to be part of using it for good. And so we built out a new fund focused specifically on tourism, putting some of our money into it, also bringing others to the table. And it's called the Reset Tourism Fund. And we're going to target those companies that represent the best future for tourism, the most sustainable, the most impactful, the most community enhancing. And we want to give them the capital they need to grow. So yeah, it's a big goal we have, to build out a $10 million fund specifically focused on tourism. And we've made our first 7 investments. We have some more on the way. We've got 2 key partners that have joined the fund, and some that folks may have heard of. Expedia has committed to the fund, and also TUI in their foundation. So we have 2 of the largest travel companies in the world who have joined us to support this initiative to fund these entrepreneurs who are changing the world with tourism.
Great to hear, great to know. It's excellent that other companies are recognizing your excellence in terms of this foundation. Jonathan, I always love to hear anecdotes, and you shared with us what a giant impact global tourism has on our world. So we want to know any examples, any partners that you've been working with that you can share with us.
Sure. Yeah. One loan that we just recently did was for a safari company in Kenya, a transport company. So it's 2 local Kenyans. They had started with 2 motorcycle taxis, and they had day jobs, and on the side they started a motorcycle taxi company with two motorcycles. And they grew it to this large transport company that moved into tourism, and they started doing safari transport and general tourism transport. But they, they recognized that specifically vehicle transport is necessary in tourism, of course, but it also has negative impacts on the environment. And so their goal is to transition their fleet for this company in Kenya, transition their fleet to more climate friendly vehicles. And so they wanted to purchase 2 hybrid vehicles to begin their transition. There's not an infrastructure for fully electric vehicles there in Kenya just yet. So hybrid is the one that makes the most sense. So we helped to finance those first 2 vehicles that they purchased to begin transferring their full fleet over to more climate friendly options. So this is the kind of thing that we like to do. We can provide flexible and more affordable capital for them than what their local bank could provide. So it helps to accelerate their movement into this climate friendly transport option, which of course will also make their business more attractive to the kind of tour operators that are out there that have those same values. So it's both a good business decision and a good decision for the environment.
And Jonathan, you're also sharing with us that a lot of these companies that you're giving financial support to is through loans, and that money gets recycled, comes back to the fund, and then that gives you the opportunity to work with the next group of companies that meet your goals and objectives.
Exactly. Yeah. So we don't do grants. We only do loans or other types of investments. Sometimes it's more equity types, just depending on the situation, but usually it's loans. And yeah, the idea is that money recycles and comes back in. And then we do it again. We get it back out the door to the next amazing entrepreneur.
Wash, rinse, repeat. I like the sound of that. Jonathan, do you have another example of a great entrepreneur that you have partnered with?
Yeah, another one that's been really interesting is actually based here in the U.S., and they're more B2B. So they service hotels and they provide wearable panic buttons for hotel housekeeping staff. So housekeepers are often the most vulnerable of our industry. They're the lowest paid, almost always women, and the most at risk for harassment and violence. So these panic buttons allow for, at the push of a button for everyone else in the hotel to know that there's an emergency and to come running and to know where they are. So it's a really powerful tool using technology, both hardware and software, to really protect the most vulnerable folks of our industry. And so this is a good example of an equity investment for a company that has really potential to grow, and as they grow, of course, it's financially beneficial, but more importantly, it has huge impact. The more of these buttons that get out into the world, the safer that these hotel housekeepers are, and so that's the ultimate goal for us.
That sounds like a fantastic tool to help out these individuals who are commonly at risk within the hotel industry. The UnTours Foundation, Jonathan, sounds like just a great opportunity for organizations to partner with you. How do people learn more about the opportunities or get in touch with you?
Yeah, let's start with the partnership opportunities. So there's a few different ways that companies or organizations can partner. First and foremost, those with the resources or their own philanthropic efforts can join as a funding partner. So this is what Expedia and TUI have done, and together we have just over $500,000 between our own money and the money that TUI and Expedia have put in. We're trying to get to $1 million quickly here to have a really kind of formal launch of the fund with that amount of money, and then grow it from there up to 10 million. So we would love to have funding partners join. If for those that have the capacity, from small dollars to big dollars, everything is important, and we have the capacity to bring that money in and really, like I said, put it back out into the world to really have this outsized impact. We also are looking for partners to help us spread the word and get the information out or help with other aspects of the management of the fund. But on the application side, or the entrepreneur or small tourism business side, folks can go to our website and apply. There's a link to the Reset Tourism Fund there, and then a button for our application, and they just apply, and we collect those applications and hopefully identify the best of those and the most exciting, and we'll get them the money they need. And Richard, did you want to add anything to that?
I think what's really important about all this is it helps create a practical example for the tourism industry. Other industries have long been greening their supply chains, and that's what this is. It's finding a way to help your suppliers become more environmentally and socially responsible, so that you as an overall company, something that the Walmarts of the world and obviously the Patagonias of the world spend all their time doing sustainability wise, looking for ways to get that supply chain more environmentally and socially sound. And here with tourism, we have such a fragmented industry. You don't have a big company that can have really big initiatives across and be an example for the entire industry. So with this, we're able to create a practical example for a way for the industry to support the kind of people and the kind of initiatives that are helping to create a better tourism industry.
Yeah. Very well said, Richard. It's super important. And just to add a little bit to that, there's a lot of talk in our industry about sustainability, about the future of tourism and what that looks like. And it's better for local communities and the destinations and the travelers themselves and the natural environment. There's a lot of talk. There's very little money going to the businesses that are at the forefront of that. Very little. And so we're trying to bridge that gap. We are hopefully funding a better future of tourism. That's what the Reset Tourism Fund is about. So yeah, it's an opportunity, as Richard said, for those large companies to play an important role for their suppliers, and for the industry as a whole to just have, provide the right types of resources to actually see real change happen.
Both of you, thank you for that recap. That was helpful. And Jonathan, echoing some of your earlier comments, we can't forget this. I mean, global tourism has such a giant footprint on the earth. I mean, from good and bad, it's 10% of the workforce, 10% of GDP. Unfortunately, you're saying around 10% of emissions. So it's impressive. It's great to see the, in essence, lofty ambitions of the UnTours Foundation making progress in addressing some of these challenges. I'd like to turn it over to you, Richard. UnTours, it's a nifty name, but there's a little bit more to that. Can you unpack and share with us what the brand really means?
It's about immersing in one place. So an untour, as opposed to a tour, it's not a tour, it's an untour. You're not moving around quickly in sort of a cattle car style of tourism with a big group. It's basically the opposite. We're finding one accommodation, a villa, an apartment in a usually European city or village or countryside or vineyard, and you're staying there for a week. And so we're providing the logistics and support, and we have someone on the ground who's a local to support you while you're there, but to support you and being an independent traveler. That's what it's about. So we are untourists, as we call them. They want the help. They enjoy the help. The beginning of their vacation is about getting sort of sorted on the ground, but then they want to be on their own from there on out. And it's the way my wife and I travel. So it's really kind of easy to understand. You want to be part of the local culture, and those are the things that create memories.
Richard, I enjoyed learning more about your company the other day when I was reading about your services. And I think it's fantastic the way that UnTours acts as the catalyst to help you embed within the neighborhood. And, I'm thinking of myself when I'm doing travels and you end up going to get coffee for the third day. The barista recognizes you, you learn his name, and then the next day you're back at the same coffee shop and they remember your order. And it's great to see that you guys are able to expedite kind of these relationships that you're building when you go on your travels. Let's touch on this once more. I want to learn about Unpack Once. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, Unpack Once is sort of our new little tagline, actually. So you get to your destination, and you're not worried about moving to the next place or what time you have to be anywhere. Really, you're worried about if you're worried. That's a big word. You're worried about becoming that part of that coffee clutch that you just mentioned in the local town, and smelling the aromas of the place, and taking your time and discovering things that you wouldn't otherwise see or experience if you were going sort of at top speed or at scheduled speed. You don't have a schedule, so we've provided your transportation when you want to get around. We've provided someone to help you decide what you want to do. We've hand chosen the accommodation, that apartment or villa, and so those things are taken care of, and it's just up to you to feel a part of that place.
Richard, let's touch on that a little bit more. I know UnTours, one of the major things that you do is sourcing the local apartment for a week or two, but you also provide transportation, and that differs by location to location. So what does that mean exactly?
It's the most appropriate form of transportation, attempting to be sustainable as well for each destination. So we do have rental cars in places where that's the only way you could really get around, in Tuscany, for example. But in Switzerland, what we're providing you is a Swiss pass, Swiss rail pass. So you're using that amazing rail system and lessening your environmental impact exponentially by just bopping around on Swiss rail and getting off where you need to, and having that amazing system work for you. So we're making choices that are the most beneficial to that local place, always on those transportation decisions.
Richard, I don't want to gloss over it. So let's talk a little bit more about the local contact, because I believe that's a real differentiator. So how does your local friend, the local contact, help your guest embed within the community?
Right. In each of our destinations, we have an on-site host, and it's a local person who has either lived in that destination for a long time, or maybe their family has been there for generations. In any case, they have great local knowledge, helpful people, excited to work with visitors, and but not kind of a professional, slick tour guide. They are. It's really the way you just said it, Rick. It's like having a friend in that place, and so that you've asked them the same kinds of things, recommendations, help. If you're in a little bit of a bind, they're happy to help get you out of that bind. So it really feels like someone that you've known for a long time, and we look for the kind of people that are really comfortable with that role.
And having that local contact can just make such a world of difference when you land in a new location.
Definitely. It kind of gives you a peace of mind. It makes things smoother, quicker, but also just leaves your schedule open at the same time.
I wanted to take a moment to emphasize or re-emphasize a theme we've been talking about before, and that's the sustainability of this method of travel, the UnTour. And you can think of trips or tours you might have done in the past where you're checking in and out of hotels. Maybe you're flying between city to city to get a brief glimpse of one area versus another. And the UnTours model is just so much better and sounder for the environment and the local community. So great thing to point out once again. Either one of you, Jonathan or Richard, do you have any stories, anecdotes, experiences of your clients overseas and staying in a local neighborhood on one of their trips?
I have one. I'll jump in here with a good story. I was in Switzerland last year visiting our sites there and visiting with some untourists, as we call them, our clients who travel with us. And and we have one of our local staff in Switzerland is a guy named Urs, and Urs is a yodeler and a singer. And so one of the best parts about hanging out with Urs is that he just yodels all the time. And you hike down the trails in the Swiss Alps with a yodeling guide, which is very cool and fitting. But also in this case, Urs is also a singer, and he has some kind of singing groups that he's a part of in Thun, in his town where he lives on a lake in Switzerland. And so he was meeting some of our guests that had arrived that week, and there was a couple that he was chatting with, and he found they were into music, and so he said, "Great, I actually have a singing concert at a church in my town in a couple of days. Please come visit." So he told them how to get there by taking train, then boat, and they took a boat to Thun, and then they got off and they watched this concert, in a 500-year-old chapel in the middle of an ancient city, and had kind of backstage passes with Urs, and he'd take them and show them around. And just, again, like we've used this term, like friend, he did anything a good friend would do if they had someone visiting them in that time. And he brought them in and welcomed them into a really cool part of his life, which was nothing to do with UnTours. He was just singing as part of his group, but he welcomed our clients in, and they had a once in a lifetime experience that almost no one will be able to replicate, and they'll always remember it. And so that's the type of serendipity that happens in our trips, and we try to ensure that the serendipity happens by having these hosts there who know how to point in the right direction and help to facilitate it.
These local guides or friends really have the ability to create these magical opportunities and travel memories.
Yeah, that's right.
Richard, any thoughts on your end of a great experience?
I just add to Urs stories. We could actually talk about Urs for a couple of weeks, probably.
That's the next podcast. Is just an Urs podcast. How's that
Urs
sound?
podcast, exactly. So I was with him just a couple of weeks ago, and I'll give a little secret away if you're planning on traveling with us. It won't be an accident if you hear him yodeling. I got to spend the day with him, and I think he yodeled 7 or 8 times at 7 or 8 different spots around Thun, which is a great name for the town. Thun, it's in Thun. He's in Thun. He's a singer. His yodeling is completely in Thun, and the Swiss there, locals, stop when he is yodeling to listen and clap, and it's an amazing experience. And Urs, I guess yodeling wasn't enough in a church, under a tree. He found this huge tree that had and had found that in the underbrush of that tree, the yodeling was great. So we did that, and then he found a cheese festival. A once-a-year cheese festival was happening that day, and so we were able to taste and visit and try cheese and wine and see how it's made, and he just knows what to do and when to do it.
Richard, you can sign me up. I would love a night or evening of wine and cheese. I've been on your website a number of times, and I love the locations you offer. What's one of your personal favorites that UnTours does offer its guests? Jonathan, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm tempted to say Switzerland, but we've already talked about Switzerland. It is amazing and one of my favorites, just because the way that the rail system is so convenient, and every view out every window is like a movie, But I won't say that. So I'll say, actually, I just spent this past fall some time in Provence in southern France, and I was there by myself because I was working and I had left my wife at home. But the whole time I was there, I was just imagining the next time I come, in which I am required to bring my wife, because it's just like food and wine bliss, And again, with a local host to tell you exactly where to go and exactly the best wineries to get to and exactly the best restaurants. And so, it was an amazing romantic place to be. And it kind of was everything French wine country was supposed to be. And what we try to replicate here in the States, like it was there. It was perfect in all its glory. And so, yeah, I think Provence is certainly on the top of my list right now.
Jonathan, that's quite impressive. A work trip that's romantic. It's going to be triply good when you return with your wife.
I know it was the imagination of the future trip with my wife that made it romantic.
Jonathan, you're speaking about what so many people love about France, right? The food, the wine, the culture, and so much more. Did your local friend, your guide, give you any advice on what you should be doing in France?
I mean, the best piece of advice she gave me is just the wine village that I should visit. And so I went to a place called Gigondas. My French is poor, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it is the quintessential French countryside wine mountain village. It is just everything you could ever hope for, with wine everywhere, vineyards as far as the eye can see out below, the perfect kind of architecture in the town, and just 3 or 4 amazing restaurants, all with amazing wine. Everything that, yeah, just everything you would hope for when you're going on a visit like that. So that was advice that I treasured and took great advantage of, and filled my suitcase with the wine to come home with as well.
That sounds like a pretty amazing trip, to say the least. And Richard, I'd like to bring you in as well. What's one of your favorite locations that you offer?
Well, my new favorite might be Switzerland, just the way Jonathan said it. But we talked a lot about Switzerland, and I certainly wouldn't put Tuscany in second place. Just had a wonderful experience there with our Tuscany on-site host, and she was able to point me to a local sort of just someone who's involved in politics and just involved in the community in Siena, and he got us into a late night sold out concert right in downtown Siena in the main cathedral. Sold out, but he just slid us in the side, and we were able to experience that late at night. I think we were the only Americans. Well, I was with the Mexicans, so we're the only ones that weren't Italian in that place at the moment. And wow, if the energy of the local folks at a concert that was for them, and getting that inside information to be able to do that, which we can't promise things like. We can promise things like this on every UnTour. We can't promise the exact ones that we're talking about, but it really does pave the way to those kinds of unique experiences.
I just want to reemphasize again, these are just the great memories, the fantastic experiences that you go home with and treasure forever. You guys have great locations. What's the process of adding new ones, or are you thinking of adding new ones? How's that work at UnTours?
We're thinking hard about that across the board, but we get real scientific about it and put it out to our social media. Our Facebook following is extremely active and vocal and engaged. A lot of our former travelers are in there, the UnTourists are in there. And so aside from more formal marketing surveys that we do, what keeps popping up on the socials is Japan. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had. It really lends itself to the same kind of feelings. A place where you could go and be in one place for a week, no problem, and have plenty to do all over Japan. There's so many candidates there. So that's something that keeps bubbling to the top, that people who are following us on Instagram or Facebook would see has happened, or see has come up a few times. Something that's not new but is really growing fast is Greece. So we have the cutest little town in Nafplio in Greece that is the fastest growing destination for us. So we are very much in more Greece mode as well.
UnTours really offers such a great value proposition for your clients. It helps act as a catalyst to embed them in their local neighborhood to create these great experiences. You have a unique setup in terms of your corporate structure being owned by the foundation, all the profits going into the foundation to support great companies around the world. The third part that's kind of missing is getting the word out. And Richard, you do have somewhat of an announcement to talk about how you'll be doing some of your marketing in the near future.
We're trying to reach outside of the folks we've been talking to for the last 30 or 40 years. It's a tight group. And what that entails is a brand that appeals to more different kinds of people. Maybe digital nomads, maybe young families, just as Jonathan described his sister and several kids. Those kinds of people really don't know what an UnTour is or haven't heard of an UnTour. And so what we've decided to do is part of what we're doing is work with Travel Massive and reach out to some of the influencers that really align with what we're trying to do. Think more about slow travel and sustainable travel, and create a group that we're going to call the Unfluencers for UnTours, whose primary role is to create some awareness about UnTours and the kinds of experiences that we've been talking about, and help people that may not have heard of an UnTour and maybe, as I said for myself, maybe travel that way. Maybe they would like to travel that way, but they just don't know that our service is available. It just falls between having a multi-day tour and booking it yourself with the apartment booking service. So it's just people are not aware that we have this service sitting there in the middle that really could appeal to someone who doesn't have the time to do it themselves.
Jonathan, Richard, the two of you have shared so much great information, and there's so many reasons why people should be keeping in touch with UnTours. And that could be whether you are a financial supporter of the foundation and your values align with UnTours. It could be you are a company in the tourist space and you're looking to go green and you need some financial support to make that transition. You might be a potential uninfluencer and you can keep in touch with UnTours and Travel Massive to learn about that program. And finally, if you were tempted, Greece or Italy or Switzerland, to go on one of these great UnTours and get set up in a great neighborhood and a great apartment. So how do people stay in touch?
As I mentioned, we're really active on social media, are at UnTours and Instagram, at UnTours on Facebook. You'll find the foundation on Facebook as well, and then obviously untours.com.
Jonathan, Richard, thanks so much for your time today. It was great learning more about UnTours. I'm encouraging everybody, go on their website, sign up for their social media, and keep in touch. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Jonathan and Richard for sharing so much information about UnTours. Please take a moment to learn more about the world's first certified B Corp. Check out their offerings if you're planning a trip and you want to explore a city a bit differently. And check in with Travel Massive to keep up to date on their Uninfluencer program. As always, if you're looking for any links from this episode, you can find them in our show notes. Please feel free to give us feedback, or if there's anything you'd like to hear, at podcast@travelmassive.com. And you can always check out the latest travel apps, blogs, startups that everyone is talking about over at travelmassive.com. Thanks for listening to this episode, and safe travels.
The Travel Massive Podcast. travelmassive.com.